What if it was never about love? What if the fairy tale wasn't a fairy tale at all, but a contract? In a world addicted to crowns and camera flashes, we've watched Prince Harry and Meghan Markle play out what seemed like a royal rebellion. A love story for the modern age. A couple who dared to defy the firm, walk away from the gold-plated chains of monarchy, and write their own script outside palace gates. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But now, that script has been torn up, and Harry has walked out. Not stormed, not slammed doors. He walked, quietly, deliberately, leaving behind a California mansion built on streaming deals, brand power, and public perception. What changed? That's the million-dollar question. Or perhaps, the $100 million question. Because beneath the smiling portraits, podcast deals, and public declarations of love, there was something else. Something whispered behind closed doors. Something she thought would stay buried. Until Harry found it. And when he did, when he saw what she'd really been hiding, it shattered everything. So now we're left with a trail of breadcrumbs. A letter here. A diary entry there. A Hollywood exec who broke their silence. A royal cousin who heard something they shouldn't have. And suddenly, the fairy tale is cracking. This isn't just a breakup. This isn't just celebrity gossip. This is a reckoning. Let's go back for a moment. Back to the beginning. Before Oprah. Before Montecito. Before the Netflix millions and the Archwell brand machine. Before Frogmore Cottage and the Royal Retreat. Before Meghan wore the Givenchy gown that had the world gasping. Before it all. Back to the first text. Back to when a prince saw a beautiful woman on Instagram and asked a friend to make an introduction. Two worlds collided. One born of palaces, the other of paparazzi. But here's the thing. From the start, they weren't just falling in love, they were falling into roles. Harry, the rebellious royal, looking for freedom. Meghan, the struggling actress, looking for a stage big enough to finally match her ambition. Was it destiny? Or design? Because in Hollywood, nothing is accidental. Every move has a purpose. Every connection is a potential career-defining play. And Meghan, let's be honest, was no stranger to this game. She'd worked her way up through bit parts, red carpet appearances, and a lifestyle blog that looked like a digital vision board for future fame. She had the look, the polish, the drive, but something was always missing. A platform, a name, a legacy. And then came Harry, the golden goose of global attention, the spare to the air, damaged, yes, but adored. Hunted by cameras since birth, and now single, searching, vulnerable. Can you see it yet? The perfect storm. But to be clear, this isn't about villainizing Meghan. This is about unpacking what really went down, and why, years later, that storm finally swallowed them whole. Because something just broke. And people close to the couple say this time, it's permanent. What tipped him over the edge? What secret was so devastating that it tore apart a man who once said, "I will do anything to protect her"? We've heard whispers, allegations, unconfirmed leaks. But now, the puzzle pieces are starting to fall into place. And let's not forget the timing. Why now? Why, after all the interviews, brand launches, baby announcements, and endless media spins, did Harry finally walk? That's the part that has insiders buzzing. Some say he found a letter. Others point to a business deal she brokered behind his back. There are even rumors of an old diary, buried in a drawer, filled with dreams that never included Harry's name. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. What matters now is that the mask has slipped. And it's not just Harry who's seeing the truth. It's the world. Millions watch them escape the monarchy, claiming love as their compass. But now, people are asking questions they never dared before. Was it ever real? Did she ever truly love him? Or was he just the final rung on a very tall ladder? Because let's be honest, you don't walk away from royalty unless you're walking towards something even bigger. And Meghan? She walked fast. Hollywood, Spotify, Netflix, memoirs, voiceovers, magazine covers. Every move was strategic. Every appearance calculated. Meanwhile, Harry, once the most popular royal after Diana, began to fade. A shadow next to a woman who thrived in the spotlight he once resented. And while she blossomed, he unraveled. He lost his titles, his family, his home in the UK, his military honors, his public goodwill, all sacrificed in the name of their love story. But what if that story was written by just one author? and the other didn't even get to read the final draft? That's what sources close to the palace are now suggesting. That Harry, in his desperation to escape royal pain, became blind to the motivations of the person he entrusted with his freedom. And now, that blindness has cost him everything. They say love is blind, but when it regains its sight, the results can be explosive. And that explosion has begun. Because here's the truth. Behind the Montecito walls, the Netflix empire, the photogenic family, was a truth too toxic to ignore. And Harry couldn't unsee it. So he walked. And this time, there's no going back. Because when a man gives up everything for love, and then finds out that love was never real, he doesn't just get angry. He gets free. But the story doesn't end there. Because what came next, no one saw coming. And that's where we begin. What does it take to make a prince walk away from everything? Not once, but twice. He'd already left the monarchy, his home, his family, his military titles, his entire royal identity. So what could possibly be left to break? Apparently, everything else. Because when Prince Harry walked out of their $14 million Montecito estate, he didn't just leave a house behind. He left the illusion. Let's rewind the scene. Not to the public outings or the glam photo shoots, but to the inside of that home, the one Harry once called his safe space. The home they claimed gave them freedom. It wasn't just an argument. It wasn't just a bad day. It was the moment. The moment something snapped. And insiders say it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was silent and ice cold. A glass left untouched. A suitcase already half-packed. A phone left on the edge of the counter, vibrating quietly as it lit up with the name Tasha, WMEPR. The tension in the house had been building for weeks. Some say months, others years. But this time, something was different. He'd seen something. What exactly? We'll get to that. But let's just say, it wasn't a headline. It wasn't a tabloid story. It wasn't hearsay. It was something personal, private, and undeniable. It changed everything. But that night, all Meghan saw was his face. Pale. Cold. Void of the emotional warmth he'd always reserved for her, even in their darkest moments. This wasn't the man who defended her at all costs. The man who threw punches in interviews to protect her image. The man who sacrificed his family name to be hers. No, this was a man who looked done. According to one Montecito staffer, who has since quietly resigned, Harry said just 3 words before walking out the front door. I finally see. 3 words. Not I'm sorry. Not goodbye. Not even I'm angry. Just, I finally see. But what had he seen? Some say he caught sight of an email chain between Meghan and her PR team discussing divergent branding strategies. Others suggest it was a legal document, drawn up long before their marriage, that outlined contingency clauses should Harry lose royal privileges. Then there are the more personal rumors. An old diary, misplaced voice notes, or a candid message Meghan sent to a close friend that revealed how calculated her moves had always been. We don't know which of these is true. Maybe all of them are. Maybe none. But what we do know is that it wasn't one moment. It was the final moment. Because Harry, known for his loyalty, his stubbornness, his refusal to give up on those he loves, had already forgiven so much. The Oprah interview backlash. The podcast that bombed. The endless headlines about family feuds. The falling out with William. The subtle distance growing between him and Charles. He stood by her. Again and again. But every man has a line. And this was his. Insiders close to Harry say he'd begun to feel like a ghost in his own life. That the man who once walked behind Diana's coffin in front of millions had become a background character in a Netflix script he didn't write. Remember the time Meghan accepted that glossy Women of Vision award? Harry wasn't at her side. He was there, yes, but not really. He looked distracted. Hollow. Observers whispered about how his smile didn't reach his eyes. He clapped at the right moments. Walked behind her like a trained shadow. But something was gone. And that wasn't the first time. In fact, the body language experts, yes, they've been all over this, have clocked the changes for over a year. The way his shoulders sag. The hesitations in interviews. The avoidant eye contact. This isn't the same Harry we saw in South Africa, glowing next to Meghan in that famous ITV interview. This is a man unraveling. So what was the final blow? Let's trace it. A few days before the split, Meghan had allegedly attended a hush-hush business dinner in West Hollywood. Not a charity gala. Not a Netflix pitch meeting. Something else entirely. Sources say the attendees weren't entertainment execs. They were investors, brand strategists, fashion magnates, global lifestyle influencers, people who build empires. And Meghan? She wasn't there as a duchess. She was there as a founder, a solo brand. The pitch? An independent platform, her own media hub, products, lifestyle lines, wellness ventures, feminist activism repackaged for luxury retail. There was just one problem. Harry wasn't part of the plan. At least, not in any meaningful way. He was a name, a backstory, a chapter, not a co-founder, not a partner, a prop. And when Harry found out, not through her, but through someone else, something inside him broke. Can you imagine? Giving up your identity for someone, only to find out you were just a launchpad for theirs? It's one thing to be betrayed. It's another to realize you were never essential to begin with. That night, they argued. Not for hours. Not with shouting. It was sharper than that. Quieter. "I need to grow," Meghan reportedly said. "You already did," Harry responded. "Just not with me." He asked her one question. Just one. "Did you ever love me?" And according to one of Meghan's former friends, now at odds with her, she didn't say yes. She didn't say no, either. She said, "I needed you." That answer? That was the end. Because love and need are two very different things. Love chooses you every day. Love isn't conditional. Love isn't a means to an end. Need can be temporary. Need ends when the goal is met. And Harry? He was the goal. But once he served his purpose, once the doors to Hollywood opened, once the public platforms were secured, did she still choose him? That's the question that kept him up at night. The question that played over and over in his head as he stared at his children sleeping. What had he built? And for who? The man who once talked about building a safe, simple life, filled with chickens, privacy, and purpose, was now trapped in something louder, colder, and far more curated than anything he left behind in Britain. And here's the tragic irony. He thought he was escaping manipulation. He thought he was escaping control. But he ran headfirst into another version of it. Different accent, different wardrobe, same game. And the worst part? The woman he believed was his escape was writing the rules. So he walked. No press release. No official statement. No dramatic exit at LAX. Just a quiet drive to Santa Barbara. A stay at a friend's house. No security detail. Just him. Alone. Processing. Reflecting. Rebuilding. And yet, as he sat in that unfamiliar guest room, there was one thing he didn't know. One final piece of the puzzle he hadn't seen yet. One name. One document. One truth that would send this whole story into another spiral. And when he found it, it changed everything. Did you ever wonder who was auditioning for what? Was Harry auditioning for Hollywood? Or was Hollywood auditioning for Meghan? Because if Chapter 1 showed us a man waking up, Chapter 2 shows us the world she was always walking toward. A world built on optics, alliances, headlines, and launchpads. The monarchy was one set. Hollywood was another. But the spotlight? It was always the same gravity. And now that the spotlight has swallowed one half of this couple whole, we need to trace the arc that made it inevitable. Not summarize it. Dissect it. Diagnose it. Almost like an autopsy on a romance that died from ambition, irony, and carefully drafted perception. So let's take a deep breath and start where the dreams were first seeded. Not at Kensington Palace, not at Windsor Castle, but in Los Angeles, long before the wedding invitations were even printed. Part 1. The audition tape the world never saw. Her first royal role wasn't a duchess. It was the woman with impeccable PR instincts who already knew how to behave like one. That line has been repeated by stylists, producers, agents, and journalists who encountered Meghan before she met Harry. Before Harry entered her life, Meghan was already executing a long-form brand narrative. She ran a lifestyle blog called the TIG. She curated mood boards with phrases like empowerment, humanitarian identity, classic minimal glamour, and global resonance. All concepts that Hollywood values because they're easy to monetize at scale. You know what's ironic? The content she built as a private citizen mimicked the cadence of someone who was preparing for a public life far larger than everything she had access to at that moment. But while Meghan was building an image system, Harry was demolishing his. Total juxtaposition. She was collecting platforms. He was burning them down. Do you see the paradox yet? Do you sense the structural fault line they were building their house on? She was amplification. He was rejection. Fame forward meets fame averse. A mirror cracked before the reflection even aligned. Part 2. The ladder, the palace, the global stage. In Britain, a royal title is history. In Hollywood, it's currency. Titles function very differently depending on geography. In the royal system, a title defines duty. In Hollywood, it drives leverage. That's not an insult. That's mechanics. Let's play a game for a second. If you were an agent representing Meghan Markle in 2015, would you pitch her as a character actress? A leading lady? A bit part player? Or would you tell her, you are bigger than the screen. You are the screen. Because that's what happened. Not literally, but tonally. One of the reasons Hollywood embraced Meghan so quickly after Megxit is because she didn't show up like someone who was entering a new world. She showed up like someone who was returning with a promotion. Her playbook already included narrative control, curated relatability, humanitarian optics interwoven with lifestyle glamour, media-friendly empowerment rhetoric, celebrity adjacency as a long-form brand architecture, and, most importantly, a protagonist energy that made every room feel like a pitch meeting. But popularity in Hollywood is not built on sentiment alone. It's built on alliances. So the biggest question now becomes, who were the alliances? And when did they shift shape from friends to fuse points? Part 3. Allies, advisors, and the quiet empire builders. Friends don't write press strategies. Advisors do. And this is where the story gets juicy, convoluted, and ripe for contradiction. Some of Meghan's most visible early Hollywood alliances came in the form of friendships that looked glossy on magazine covers. Serena Williams, Oprah Winfrey, Priyanka Chopra, Tyler Perry, Ellen DeGeneres. Even fleeting red carpet exchanges with A-list elites that signaled social ascent. But behind those appearances, deeper alliances formed, quieter ones. Executives, investors, consultants. People without fan followings, but with brand followings. The architects, not the avatars. Hollywood runs on hierarchy too. It's just invisible. And Meghan, whether by instinct or by design, plugged into the invisible tier faster than Harry ever plugged into the visible one. One royal historian in London explained it this way. Monarchy is inherited. Hollywood is engineered. Meghan engineered inheritance she wasn't born into. Savage line, but topical. Not defamatory if we interpret it as a narrative device inside your fictional creative universe, which is how we'll frame all sensitive character claims here. This is dramatized storytelling, not fact assertion about real people. Part 4. Harry's apocalypse versus Meghan's launch event. You burn castles when you're angry. You build studios when you have meetings. Harry emotionally combusted during Megxit. Meghan operationalized afterward. He said, I hate the media. She said, let's tell that story on camera. He wanted peace. She branded freedom. He saw royalty as pain. She repurposed royalty as megaphone potential. He ducked from cameras. She leaned into branding lanes that cameras capture beautifully. Feminist leadership, self-authored philanthropy empires, celebrity event adjacency, political proximity for tension selling, and public empathy arcs. Let's slow this down. Imagine this relationship move like a stage show. Harry is backstage telling staff he wants all lights off. Meghan is center stage telling producers she wants all lights pointed toward the existential irony of it. Now here's an audience question for you. Can a marriage survive when one party is running a demolition press narrative and the other is running a construction arc? Part 5. The red carpet rewired. From palace carpets to crimson carpets. Publicly, Meghan walked away from royal titles, saying monarchy constrained her. But privately, nothing suggested she walked away from hierarchy. She walked toward a different one. Do you feel the pacing now? Royal variety performance replaced with governor awards. Patronages replaced with founders' forums. Palace oversight replaced with agents. Royal mystique replaced with relatability product lines. Duty replaced with emotional identity content. But deeper irony is coming. Because sources close to Hollywood say Meghan didn't walk away from protocols. She transplanted them into PR protocols. She didn't say no to royalty. She said no to losing narrative ownership within royalty. Hollywood doesn't demand loyalty. It demands authorship. Royalty demanded submission to history. Hollywood demanded submission to the next headline cycle. Neither allowed half measures. Except, Harry thought he was escaping half measures by leaving monarchy. Meghan thought she was escaping half measures by joining what Harry left behind. Collision of mirrors. Shattered reflections. But the cracks didn't show. Not yet. Part 6. The media machine, the silent panic, and the collapse of the golden couple. Fame isn't soft. It's systematic. And the system has rules. Podcast flopping? That hurts the ego. Netflix deals underperforming expectations? That alarms investors. Public sentiment dips? That triggers rebranding cycles. And husbands detaching? That complicates press strategies. She said, "We're leaving to protect our story." He found out later he never co-wrote it to begin with. Celebrity brand analysts have explained the psychology like this. A powerful woman can fall in love with perception of partnership until partnership dilutes her spotlight economy. But Harry didn't dilute her economy. He financed it until he couldn't anymore. Part 7. Audience questions, emotional beats, and narrative payoff setup. Let's throw some questions to you directly, viewer to viewer. What matters more, the role or the person playing it? Can ambition love someone without needing them to vanish from the frame? Did Meghan marry Harry? Or did she marry the world's reaction to the words, Prince Harry and Meghan? Because if Chapter 1 was Harry's breaking point, Chapter 2 is Meghan's origin point. She had a brand before Harry, but Harry gave her a universe for it. And universes collapse when the sun decides to rise somewhere else. Which leads us to the end of this phase. Because if royal carpets were rewired, alliances were repositioned, and branding lanes diverged, then there's only one question left at this point in the story. What truth made Harry say, "I finally see"? And what did Meghan not know he was capable of discovering next? He walked out with silence. But the echo began after. Because the truth wasn't just coming out. It was coming for her. And the world was about to witness part 2 of the royal escape. Only this time, Meghan might not be the one walking away. What would you do if you discovered a letter that rewrote your entire relationship? A piece of paper, a few paragraphs, folded neatly, hidden in a drawer you were never meant to open. That's exactly what Prince Harry found. And when he read it, line by line, his world shifted. Not dramatically, not instantly, but like slow tectonic plates moving under his feet. Until the ground gave way completely. Because the letter didn't just reveal a secret. It exposed a plan. And that plan didn't include him. Let's rewind to the scene. Harry was alone. Meghan had just left for a high-level branding dinner in Los Angeles. Staff had been given the evening off. The house was silent, eerily so. He wasn't looking for anything. At least, that's what he told himself. But sometimes the truth finds you when you least expect it. He opened a drawer in her office. Maybe instinct. Maybe habit. Maybe fate. That's where he saw it. A cream envelope. Thick. Heavy. Hand-addressed in black ink. No stamp. No return address. But the name at the top stopped him cold. Meghan, keep for records. Curious, he opened it. He wasn't prepared for what he found. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. A full-page letter, dated 6 months before their wedding. Written by a close advisor. A friend. A Hollywood insider who had been helping Meghan navigate the transition from actress to royal. It read like a business memo, brutally pragmatic, coldly efficient. It detailed how to maximize long-term public positioning during and after her entry into the royal family. Let's break down what it said, at least according to the alleged leaks from someone close to Harry. The letter included bullet points. Establish clear narrative as modern outsider disrupting archaic system. Leverage public sympathy through targeted authenticity campaigns. Race, American identity, feminist values. Control brand optics early. Lock and docuseries deal before press turns hostile. Phase 1, royal entry. Phase 2, transition to independent platform within 24 to 36 months. And then came the line that broke him. Your husband must be part of the story, but not the brand. Read that again. Part of the story, but not the brand. That sentence rang in his ears like a bell tolling the end of a marriage. He reread it, again and again, trying to convince himself it meant something else. Maybe it was taken out of context. Maybe it was just marketing language. Maybe it was a misunderstood suggestion from an overzealous friend. But no matter how many justifications he created, the implication was clear. His love, his commitment, his entire world had been a step in someone else's ladder. And the letter proved it wasn't a last-minute shift. It had been mapped out, in ink, before the wedding, before the vows, before he ever knew what he was walking into. Let's stop here for a moment. Can you imagine being in Harry's shoes? You gave up everything. Your family, your country, your role, your reputation. You endured headlines, betrayals, public ridicule, late nights defending your partner, private therapy, public scrutiny, estrangement from your brother, tension with your father, the entire British establishment against you. And now, you find a letter that suggests none of it was spontaneous? That it was all a rollout plan, a brand arc? Your trauma, her timing, your pain, their platform. It was betrayal dressed as strategy. And that's when it clicked. Harry remembered moments that suddenly made new sense. The way Meghan had insisted on recording private moments, even before they left the UK. The camera crews that showed up suspiciously fast. The early talks with Netflix, months before the public fallout. The carefully curated narrative of trapped royals fleeing oppression, which sounded noble, until he realized he wasn't the author of that story. He was the proof of it. The crown she never wanted was the spotlight she never let go of. And the man she said she needed was the symbol that made her need marketable. Harry sat with the letter in his hands for almost an hour. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't call anyone. He just stared at the sentence over and over. Your husband must be part of the story, but not the brand. And then he flipped the page, because there was one more section. A paragraph. Small. Tucked at the bottom. Almost as if it was meant to be missed. It read, if public sentiment becomes negative, initiate separation optics early. Emphasize solo identity, independence, and evolution of self. Prince's support can still serve as character endorsement without requiring emotional partnership. Let that sink in. Not just brand building. Exit strategy. She wasn't just planning how to rise. She was planning how to leave. Not then. Maybe not soon. But eventually. And that's when the last illusion shattered. Harry realized he hadn't married a partner. He had married a campaign. A brilliantly executed, masterfully marketed, ruthlessly scalable campaign. And he was the first phase, but not the final destination. Let's pause again. Ask yourself, what would you do if you read that? If you found your partner's roadmap for building a life, where you were reduced to a stepping stone, would you confront them? Would you burn the letter? Would you leak it? Harry did none of those things. At least, not immediately. He folded it, put it back in the envelope, and tucked it into his jacket pocket, because he needed time, not just to grieve, but to calculate. And that's when the story shifts. Because until now, Harry had been the emotional one, the impulsive one, the heart-on-sleeve soldier who acted from trauma. But now he was quiet, focused, for the first time in years strategic. Because this letter wasn't just an ending. It was ammunition. And Harry, burned by both royalty and rebellion, was finally ready to fight back. But he wouldn't do it loudly. Not yet. He'd let her talk. Let her post. Let her plan. Because while she positioned herself for her next phase, he was already working on his. And it started with 3 calls. One to a lawyer, one to a journalist, and one to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who once warned him. Someone who tried to stop the wedding. And that person? They had their own letter. One Meghan never knew had been kept. And that letter contained a secret no one was ready for. They said it was about love. They said they just wanted privacy. They said it wasn't about money. But when you follow the headlines, and then follow the money trail, something doesn't add up. Because behind every emotional speech, every tearful interview, every carefully lit photo of chicken coops and barefoot garden chats, there were contracts, deals, multi-million-dollar agreements, negotiated in boardrooms, brokered by teams, protected by airtight NDAs. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Some of those deals were drafted, outlined, and pitched, long before they ever stepped down from the royal family. Yes. While the world thought Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were victims of palace cruelty, caught off guard by an unforgiving institution, the paperwork behind the scenes tells a far colder, far more calculated story. So let's unpack it. Let's follow the money. Let's trace the timeline that blew the lid off that we didn't plan this narrative. Because as Harry clutched that letter in Chapter 3, he realized the manipulation wasn't just emotional. It was financial, and he was the product, not a partner. Let's go back to late 2018. Their wedding had just made global history. The dress, the choir, the hand-holding, the royal kiss. A mixed-race American actress marrying into the most traditional monarchy in the world? It was the ultimate modern fairy tale. But even as the carriage horses trotted through Windsor, emails were already being sent. According to leaked documents later surfaced in Hollywood circles, Meghan's team began early-stage talks with streaming reps before Archie was born. Not just hypotheticals, real pitch decks, real branding proposals, tentative documentary formats, sizzle reels that never aired publicly, but were shown to studio heads behind closed doors. Netflix was first, not because of content alignment, but because of budget. They had the checkbook, and Meghan knew what she was worth. Let's be real. So did Harry. He's no fool. He knew there was value in his story, in their story. But what he didn't know, what he would only discover later, was how far back those conversations stretched. Spotify came next. Not a podcast idea, but a content ecosystem. Meghan is host. Harry is guest. Guests curated by image teams. Themes revolving around healing, justice, identity. It sounded empowering. It was empowering. Until you realized the timelines. Internal documents from Spotify, later leaked during layoffs, showed that Meghan's representation had approached them within weeks of the Oprah interview airing. Deals weren't a reaction to their trauma. Their trauma was used to justify the deals. Let that sink in. Now, most people didn't see this. They saw headlines. $20M Spotify deal. $100M Netflix contract. They thought, good for them. Escape the palace. Tell your story. But they missed the detail in the footnotes. Many of those deal memos included exclusivity clauses, meaning Meghan and Harry couldn't contradict the narrative they sold. So when Harry wanted to pause their public life in mid-2022, go quiet, reset, reflect, he was told they couldn't. They owed content. They owed drama. They owed relevance. In one insider's words, silence doesn't sell. And silence was all Harry wanted. But Meghan? She leaned in. She filmed. She posted. She branded herself as everything from a maternal goddess to a social warrior to a misunderstood feminist icon. Each identity tied to a platform. Each platform tied to revenue. Archewell became more than a charity. It became a shell company, a media agency, a lifestyle brand waiting to scale. They launched children's books, pitched animated series, explored skincare, filed trademarks. And Harry, once the center of this orbit, realized he'd become an accessory. At first, he went along with it. He wore the suits, said the lines, smiled on the panels, waved to the crowds at private events. But behind the scenes, he was unraveling, because money wasn't the only thing being exchanged. Narrative control was the true currency, and Meghan held the ledger. Let's pause and ask the question no one dared at the time. If you built an entire commercial empire based on a love story, what happens to the business when the love dies? You can't pivot. You can't restructure. You can't suddenly say, oops, we're just colleagues now, because the money was tied to the myth. And the myth required maintenance. Here's where it gets darker. Insiders claim that when Harry began questioning things, when he started asking why certain meetings happened without him, why certain pitches excluded him, he was told not to rock the boat. By whom? Not Meghan directly, but her team, advisors, legal reps, brand handlers, the people protecting the asset. Harry wasn't seen as a co-founder anymore. He was seen as unpredictable, unstable, a liability. And once the money people start thinking that way, they replace you. Not personally, professionally. Your narrative gets reshaped. Your interviews get dialed down. You become the quiet partner. But Harry had never been quiet. And now, with that secret letter in his back pocket, he wasn't just suspicious. He was furious, because the truth was right in front of him. The palace had been accused of using him as a puppet. But now, so had she. He left one machine, only to get plugged into another. And that second machine was better disguised, wore better clothes, said prettier words. But it still consumed him. The Netflix camera crews didn't just show up at key moments. They were scheduled. Harry was told to act natural in scenes that had been storyboarded. Scenes like him feeding the chickens with Meghan, him showing his son photos of Diana, him opening up about the rift with William on cue. Were those moments authentic? Maybe, but they were also edited, cut, packaged, sold. This wasn't life. It was a reality show wrapped in philanthropy. And now Harry realized he didn't own the rights to his own story. Let's be clear, he signed those contracts. He agreed to the branding. He said yes, but he did so believing he was protecting something sacred. His family, his truth, his wife. But the longer the money flowed, the more he noticed a pattern. Each payday came with a new sacrifice. Another piece of privacy gone. Another version of himself deleted from the public view. And Meghan? She thrived. The more she spoke, the more press she got. The more content she created, the more partnerships emerged. But Harry? He was becoming a ghost. A silent endorser. His identity flattened into two dimensions, either the loving husband or the angry prince. No in-between. No nuance. No complexity. Just a persona. A product. And that's when he made the call. He called someone in finance. Someone who used to handle royal investments. And he asked a simple question. How much of this am I actually part of? The answer? Almost none of it. The Archwell Trust. The licensing agreements. The solo projects filed under Meghan's name only. Harry had signing power for charity initiatives. But not for media projects. Not for brand launches. Not for trademark holdings. He was, legally speaking, a figurehead. And when he saw the documents, he said nothing for a long time. And then he said, I was never supposed to be part of the future. Just the origin story. That's when everything inside him changed. He didn't just feel betrayed. He felt erased. The final straw wasn't emotional. It was financial. And the receipts were undeniable. But Meghan had no idea what Harry had just uncovered. No clue he had been speaking to lawyers. No idea he'd found the letter. No inkling that her prince, her once adoring husband, was now preparing for the next move. And that move? It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Because if she was going to keep building a brand based on living her truth, Harry decided it was time to tell his. And that began with exposing the one thing Meghan thought would never surface. The diary. The one she thought was hidden. The one she never expected him to find. And in that diary was a secret that made the letter look like child's play. Some truths are whispered. Others are written. And the most dangerous kind? The ones that were never meant to be read. For Prince Harry, it was already too much. The secret letter. The financial betrayal. The feeling of being nothing more than a name in someone else's branding deck. But nothing prepared him for what came next. A small, cloth-bound journal. Soft pink leather. Gold trim along the pages. Tucked away inside an old suitcase in the back of her office closet. Unlabeled. No lock. No password. Just forgotten. Or so she thought. He wasn't looking for it. In fact, after discovering the financial documents, he'd told himself he was done searching. Done snooping. Done uncovering things he didn't want to know. But something, call it instinct, call it fate, told him to look one last time. And when he opened the journal, the first thing he saw was a line scrawled in black ink. I always wanted more, even when I had enough. That sentence hit like a lightning bolt. What did it mean? Enough what? Enough love? Enough fame? Enough him? He turned the page. And that's when he realized. This wasn't a journal written during their marriage. It was written before the wedding, before the royal titles, before the world saw Meghan as a duchess. This was Meghan the actress, Meghan the strategist, Meghan the dreamer. Except these weren't dreams. These were calculations. Paragraph after paragraph of raw, unfiltered thoughts, sometimes emotional, sometimes cold, often shockingly self-aware. She wrote about image, about perception, about what it takes to matter in a world where women are disposable after 35 unless they reinvent. And then came the entries about him. The first mention was simple. Harry, wild card. Charismatic. Lost. Powerful. Vulnerable. Useful. He blinked. Maybe she was joking. Maybe it was sarcasm. Maybe this was just a woman venting in private, scribbling her thoughts without filter. But then he saw the next entry. Dinner with friends. Everyone agrees. If I play this right, I never work a day again. Not acting. Not grinding. A different kind of fame. A softer spotlight. Prestige without pressure. He kept reading. Each page was a dagger. Not because she hated him, but because she didn't. She studied him. Observed him like a character she was preparing to play. He's sweet. Almost too much. So desperate to be loved. He'd give up anything for it. Even himself. Harry felt his throat tighten. That's exactly what he had done. And she knew it. She'd seen it coming. anticipated it, leveraged it, and still smiled at him like he was her safe place. Her hero, but in her own words, he needs rescuing. But not by me. I'm not a rescuer. I'm a builder. And he's good wood. Good wood. Like raw material. Like a tool. Like a structure to build herself upon. His hands began to shake. He read on. She detailed mock conversations with friends. How she'd turned down roles publicly to show humility. How she'd let the public discover her pain slowly for sympathy. How she'd timed the announcement of their first pregnancy to control the press cycle. Every move. Mapped. Planned. Outlined like a screenplay. And then came the kicker. An entire page, underlined in red ink. This isn't love. It's opportunity. I just have to keep playing it that way. The crown is a lens. The man is the lens holder. Harry dropped the journal. He sat on the floor, heart pounding. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't the press twisting things. This was her handwriting. Her voice. Her thoughts. Unfiltered. Undeniable. And here's the twist. She never wrote about hurting him. She didn't seem malicious. She seemed focused. Coldly focused. Like someone who'd been overlooked for too long and finally saw a shortcut. She didn't want to use him. She wanted to transform herself through him. He was the vehicle. The means. The passage from obscurity to legacy. And the only problem? He thought she loved him. He truly did. But she loved the story. And now, that story had reached its final chapter. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, if you found a diary like that, written by the person you sacrificed your life for, what would you do? Burn it? Confront them? Leak it? Keep it secret? Harry did none of those. Not right away. He closed the journal, held it in his hands for what felt like an hour. And then he called someone. The same person he'd called after finding the secret letter. The person who had tried to warn him once before. And this time, he listened. Because this time, the evidence wasn't hearsay. It was ink. And he had the pages to prove it. Let's pivot now. What was Meghan doing at that moment? Hosting a dinner. Pitching her solo brand initiative. Smiling for cameras. Unaware that the man she built her empire beside was now sitting in a guest house 3 miles away. Piecing together the truth. A truth too sharp to ignore. And now? Now he had a plan. He wasn't going to disappear. He wasn't going to fade into the background. He was going to speak. Not to the tabloids. Not to Oprah. Not to Netflix. He was going to tell his side. In his own words. Through someone the world trusted. Someone with no loyalty to Meghan. Someone with royal blood. Because the next call he made was to William. And William didn't hang up. There's something chilling about silence. Especially when it comes from someone who's seen it all. For years, Trevor Engelson said nothing. Not a word. Not a whisper. Not even when the world begged him to speak. As Meghan Markle's ex-husband, he had every reason and every opportunity to capitalize on her fame. Tabloids knocked. Biographers called. Netflix even considered dramatizing their divorce. But Trevor? He kept his mouth shut. Until now. Because when Harry found the diary, when he saw those words, he's good wood. This isn't love, it's opportunity. He knew he had to dig deeper. He needed to know if this was a pattern. Was he the only one who'd been studied, softened, and spun into someone else's narrative? Or had someone else played the same role before? There was only one man on earth who could answer that. Trevor. And the moment Harry picked up the phone, something unexpected happened. Trevor answered. No assistant. No publicist. No delay. Just a quiet voice saying, I've been waiting for this call. Let's rewind for a second, because you need to understand who Trevor Engelson really is. Before Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex, she was the actress from Suits. Before that, she was Rachel from Deal or No Deal. Before that, a hustling, ambitious woman with a dream and a boyfriend named Trevor. Trevor was a Hollywood producer. Charming, resourceful, behind the scenes, but well-connected. He helped Meghan get her foot into rooms she couldn't access alone. They dated for years, lived together, partied together, rose together. They married in 2011 in Jamaica, carefree, casual, barefoot on the beach. And then, just 2 years later, she mailed him the wedding ring. No phone call, no conversation, just a padded envelope. She ghosted him. Cold, sudden, and final. Friends were stunned. Some said Trevor was devastated. Others said he wasn't even surprised. But either way, he never told his side. Until Harry called. And this is where the story turns. Because what Trevor said that night shocked Harry, confirmed his worst fears. and planted a seed of rage so deep it made everything Harry had been through feel orchestrated from the start. Trevor began carefully, measured. "You need to understand, she's brilliant," he said. "Not beautiful, not sweet, not loving. Brilliant. That word again. The one that echoed through her diary, through the secret letter, through every strategy session her team had ever drafted. Brilliant. She has a gift," Trevor continued. "She sees people, not for who they are, but for who they can be used to become." Harry was silent. Trevor added, "And then, when they've served their purpose, she walks." It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't revenge. It was clinical, like someone describing a shark, elegant, efficient, and entirely without emotional clutter. Then Trevor told Harry something that made his stomach twist. He said, "I once read a script she wrote in college about a woman who manipulates a man into falling for her to climb the social ladder. I thought it was fiction. Now I'm not so sure." Harry's heart pounded. He thought about their first date, the way she laughed at his jokes, how she listened so intently, how he felt seen. He thought he was falling in love, but maybe he was being profiled. Then came the story that changed everything. Trevor said he had been warned. A friend of Meghan's, someone from their early days in LA, had confided in him after their divorce. "She told me Meghan always had a plan," Trevor said. "She used to say, 'I'm going to be a household name.'" But here's the twist. That same friend reached out to Trevor recently because she had found something. An email, dated 2015, from Meghan to her. Subject line, manifesting. It read, "There's someone I want to meet. I think he's broken, but people love broken boys, especially royal ones. If I play it right, he'll give me everything I've ever wanted." Harry's hands shook. He asked Trevor, "Do you still have it?" Trevor replied, "Yes, and I haven't shown anyone yet." This was no longer a sad love story. This was a calculated climb. And Meghan? She had been climbing for years. From suits to suits. From cable dramas to Buckingham Palace. From red carpets to coronation whispers. And the men she loved? They were just leverage. Harry felt nauseous. He asked Trevor the one question he never thought he'd ask. "Did she ever love you?" Trevor paused. Then he said, "I think she loved who she was with me, not me." And that's when Harry broke. Because that's exactly how he felt. She didn't love him. She loved being Meghan Markle with him. The royal glow, the media worship, the sense of power. But when the power shifted, when the brand eclipsed the bond, she moved on. Again, Trevor ended the call with a warning. She doesn't burn bridges. She makes sure they collapse on you. And then, just before hanging up, he added, "Whatever you do next, make sure you control the story. Because if you don't, she will." Harry hung up, staring into the dark, realizing that everything, the love, the marriage, the children, the tears, the speeches, the palace exodus, had been just one more chapter in a longer book. A book he never asked to be in. But now, he was ready to write the final chapter himself. And the first line would start with someone unexpected. Because someone else knew this story. Someone who had watched it from the beginning. Someone who had read Meghan like a script long before Harry ever knew her name. And she wasn't just family. She was a warning Harry should have listened to long ago. "Kate, they say hindsight is 20/20ths. But sometimes, the truth was staring you in the face the whole time. You just didn't want to see it." And for Prince Harry, there had always been one person who did see it. Kate Middleton, the sister-in-law, the elegant future queen, the woman the press tried to pit against Meghan at every turn. She had warned him, gently, politely, carefully, and he had ignored her. But now, sitting in a borrowed guest house, journal in hand, secret letter in his coat pocket, and Trevor's voice still echoing in his ears, he couldn't ignore her words anymore. Because they hadn't just been warnings. They had been prophecies. Let's take it back to the early days, the introductions, the smiles, the photo ops. When Harry brought Meghan to meet William and Kate for the first time, everyone expected it to be cordial, if not warm. After all, Kate was seen as the peacemaker, the one who soothed the tension between the brothers, the one who'd welcomed new family members in the past with quiet grace. And at first, Meghan played the role perfectly. Friendly, gracious, self-deprecating, eager to connect. She brought gifts, compliments, even baked banana bread for one of their visits, a charming gesture that photographers later ate up. But Kate? She watched. Not coldly, not rudely, but with the trained eye of someone who had spent over a decade learning how to read people through the fog of cameras, handlers, and headlines. And what she saw behind Meghan's charm frightened her, not because Meghan was mean, not because she was difficult, but because she was performing, always, like someone who couldn't stop scanning the room for reactions, for advantages, for positioning. Kate saw it, and she truly tried, to extend a real hand. They had tea together, shared stories of adjusting to royal life. Kate even offered her private stylist to help Meghan prepare for some of the formal engagements. But slowly, cracks began to show. Meghan brushed off advice, dismissed traditions, scoffed at some of the rules Kate had learned to follow without complaint. She doesn't want to adjust, Kate allegedly confided to William one night. She wants to reshape everything, to center herself. William had shrugged. At the time, he wanted to give Meghan the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's a good thing, he said. Maybe we need someone who challenges the system. But Kate shook her head. It's not the system she wants to change, she whispered. It's the spotlight. And then came the wedding, the dress fittings, the infamous bridesmaid story. We've all heard the conflicting versions. Meghan claimed Kate made her cry. The palace insisted it was the other way around. But what really happened? According to a former royal aide who witnessed part of the exchange, what happened was a clash of values. Kate wanted tradition. Meghan wanted reinvention. Kate offered compromise. Meghan pushed back. And when Kate politely reminded her of certain customs, Meghan allegedly snapped, "I'm not Kate, and I never will be." To which Kate, calmly, replied, "No, you won't. But you could try to be kind." That sentence stayed with Harry for years. But he buried it, filed it under family drama, dismissed it as the natural tension between two very different women. After all, Meghan had told him from the start, "They'll never accept me. I'm different. I'm American. I'm biracial. I'm independent." And Harry believed her. But now he wasn't so sure. Because everything Kate had quietly flagged about Meghan's calculated nature, her need to control the narrative, her discomfort with anything she didn't author herself, was all coming true. And worse, Kate had tried to shield him from it. Let's fast forward. 2 years after the wedding, Megxit had exploded. The Oprah interview had been filmed. William and Harry were barely speaking. But Kate? She sent Harry a letter. A handwritten one. Delivered privately. No press. No leaks. Just a message from sister-in-law to brother-in-law. In it, she said, "Harry, I don't know what's true anymore. But I do know this. You used to be joyful. You used to laugh. You used to be free. And I haven't seen that in you in a long time." She ended it with a simple line. Be careful who writes your story for you. At the time, Harry threw the letter in a drawer. But now, reading Meghan's diary, replaying Trevor's words, analyzing every step that led him here, that letter burned in his memory like a flare. Kate had seen it all coming. She had sensed it. And maybe that's why Meghan always seemed uncomfortable around her. Not because of jealousy, but because Kate saw through her. And now Harry was beginning to understand what that meant. He picked up the phone. For the first time in months, he called his brother. William didn't answer. So Harry tried again. Then again. Finally, he called Kate. She picked up on the first ring. There was silence at first. Then she said softly, "Harry, I was wondering when you'd call." He didn't speak right away. He couldn't. His throat clenched. His eyes filled. And for a moment, he felt like the little boy who used to hide in the palace gardens after press events, looking for his mother's voice in the breeze. Kate waited. Then, he said, "I think you were right." Silence. Then, Kate replied, "I never wanted to be." They spoke for nearly an hour. No accusations. No "I told you" SOS. Just honesty. Real, painful honesty. Harry told her about the letter, the diary, the email Trevor had, the branding deals, the financial traps, the realization that he was never part of the plan, just part of the packaging. Kate listened. And when he was done, she said something that made his chest ache. "You were always the one who wanted real love. Not perfect love, just real. That's why this hurts so much. Because it was never you she loved. It was what you gave her." That sentence hit like a freight train. Because he knew it was true. And then Kate asked the hardest question of all. "What are you going to do now?" Harry paused. And then, with a clarity he hadn't felt in years, he said, "Tell the truth." Kate's voice was calm, steady. "Then you'll need to be ready. Because when the truth threatens the brand strikes back." He nodded. He knew what was coming. The PR spin, the planted stories, the emotional deflections, the claims of victimhood. But this time, he wasn't going to stay silent. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He wasn't afraid. He was clear. He was done. And the next move wouldn't be made in secret. It would be made public. Because Meghan had built an empire on speaking her truth. But Harry? He was about to speak his. And the person he was going to speak to was already waiting. Because someone had been watching from the sidelines all along. Someone who knew exactly how fame worked. Someone who had once mentored Meghan. Promoted her. Helped her get the deal she wanted. And now, they were switching sides. And when they sat down with Harry, they brought receipts. It was the interview that stopped the world. 2 chairs, 1 garden, $1 billion media empire behind the lens. And 2 royals, Harry and Meghan, seated across from the Queen of Confessions herself, Oprah Winfrey. The year was 2021. And in the span of 85 carefully edited minutes, the monarchy was accused of racism, neglect, and cruelty. Meghan cried. Harry looked broken. Oprah leaned in with that iconic, "What?" As Meghan claimed that someone in the royal family had questioned her unborn baby's skin color. Viewers were stunned. Headlines exploded. Social media caught fire. For a moment, the world stood behind them. But now that moment is under the microscope. Because Prince Harry has uncovered something. Something Oprah never knew. Something we were never told. Something Meghan thought was buried for good. And it all started with a hard drive. Let's rewind. After his call with Kate, Harry went digging again. Not through drawers, but through data. Meghan had an external drive. Slim. Silver. Password protected. He'd seen her use it dozens of times. Photos. Voice memos. Personal files. Branding materials. And, most importantly, raw video files. When she was preparing for the Oprah interview, she recorded everything. Dress rehearsals. Mock interviews. Media coaching sessions. Notes from producers. It was standard practice for someone building a media narrative. But what Harry found wasn't standard. It was chilling. One file stood out, dated 2 weeks before the Oprah taping, labeled, Narrative Run-Through, V2 Final. He clicked. There she was, Meghan, in the same outfit she wore during the real interview, sitting in the same position. But no Oprah, just a stand-in, a friend or assistant reading Oprah's questions off a script. What Harry heard shook him. Because what Meghan rehearsed and what she eventually said weren't the same. They were rehearsed, modified, softened, calibrated, not raw revelations, refined accusations. In the clip, she practiced her response to the infamous skin color question. But in the rehearsal, she named someone, a senior royal. Harry's face turned white. Because when the Royal interview aired, Meghan had said, there were concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be. I think that would be very damaging to them. She had left the name out. Let the world fill in the blanks. But in the raw footage, she didn't hesitate. She said it, clearly, loudly. And Harry knew it wasn't true. That person, who she implied, hadn't been part of that conversation. He had. And it wasn't racism. It was curiosity, a casual remark, a family chat about who the baby might take after. Nothing sinister, nothing loaded. But now, it had been twisted into a global scandal. Used as a bullet point in a brand story. And the worst part? She practiced saying it. Practiced where to pause. How to look down. When to tear up. Harry kept watching. More clips. More rehearsals. More lines about silence. Feeling unsafe. Being trapped. All scripted. She even had cue cards. Now, let's be clear. It's not unusual for public figures to rehearse talking points. Media coaching is standard. But what Harry saw wasn't coaching. It was storyboarding. His pain. Her edits. His family. Her script. And then he opened a second file. A Zoom call. Meghan with 2 WME execs and a producer. They were discussing how to shape the fallout of the Oprah interview. One voice said, if we hold back a few details now, we can use them later, stretch the arc. Stretch. The arc. His life. His family. His trauma. An arc. A series. A saga. And just like that, it all clicked. Meghan never planned for Oprah to be the final word. It was the pilot episode. The launchpad for future content. Harry paused the video. He couldn't breathe. Because for the first time, he saw the full picture. Not just the diary. Not just the letter. Not just Trevor's email. Not just Kate's warning. The footage was the nail in the coffin. Unedited, unfiltered, undeniable. He wasn't just a husband. He was a co-star, and she had been directing him from day one. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Harry didn't keep this footage to himself. He made a copy, encrypted it, and sent it to someone who'd been watching silently for years. Oprah. Yes, the very same woman who had platformed Meghan's version of events. He wrote a note. You deserve to see the whole truth. I didn't know then. I do now. What happened next? No one knows for sure. But sources close to Oprah say she was furious. Not because Meghan had lied to her, but because she had used her. Turned Oprah into a tool, a narrative launcher. And Oprah? She doesn't forget that kind of betrayal. Quietly, she pulled back. No more calls. No more invites. No more support. And behind the scenes, she started telling people, the truth is coming. And it's not what we thought. Meghan had lost a key ally, and she didn't even know it yet. But Harry? He was just getting started. Because the footage proved it. The narrative was manufactured. The feelings were rehearsed. The story was owned. And now he had to decide.